Well, I've got a headache and I can't really figure out why. There's something going on here. Uh, it is that my head feels like it's like ready to split open. But that's what I wanted to talk to you about actually today, 101B. Let's get to how to generate ideas and follow through on them for the beginning of your magnum opus. That is your literary research paper, your critical research paper. So we're going to take this one step at a time. We have one installment that is due this week, and we just want to talk about that. We just want to talk about that and how to go about that. And in order to do that, we kind of want to build on what you've done before. So just to rewind a little bit, you did the comparison contrast about Rose for Emily. Then you did an excellent analytical paper. I have them right here. I only have one left to correct, and I'll be returning those to you in the same format that I did your first paper. So you did well on that for the most part. I mean, most of the class did really, really well on it. You focused, you stayed with your point, you hammered it home. You hammered the point home. You drove it home. A few of you still not quite getting this concept, so I'm going to try to help you with this first in a very practical way. But I've got to say, I mean, if I look at these papers, we have to showcase some of these. We're going to start a writer showcase and put some of these online so that you can look at these. I'm looking at Daniel's paper here. Hi, Daniel. Write down. The title is a real grabber. Thy name be man. And his point, he actually put it in the form of a question, and I said, Daniel, no. We don't want the rhetorical question. Turn it around and make it a statement. But it was an excellent point. All right? Jack London gives the protagonist no name because a man is a metaphor for humanity's fallibility in understanding nature. Great thesis. I mean, if he turned it around, made it a thesis. And you know what? He stayed with that throughout the essay. And he backed his point with quotes throughout the essay, and really delved in to some of the intricacies of the story, but based on that single point. He stayed with that single point. So I'm going to make a point about making points. You know what? There's a lot of mystery about what this thesis situation is and how to generate these things. But I have an idea for you. It's very natural. You know, you go to Section 8, you read some stories, you find one that grabs you. What is it that intrigued you about that story? Just write it all over the place. What did you find intriguing about that? Jot down whatever you thought piqued your interest about that story. And I don't care if it's Araby. I don't care if it's Young Goodman Brown by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I don't care if it's Greasy Lake, which is a heck of a story. Doesn't matter to me. Find out what intrigues you about that story. Start writing it down because you can make your point. See, this is an existential situation. You have choice, and choice sometimes makes life difficult because you get to pick your point. I'm just going to help you try to pick these, but I'm not going to hand it to you and say, oh, here, you have to make this point. See, that's choice. So you have a lot of choice, but I am going to give you some suggestions and possibilities. And what we're doing right now is very informal. Later on, we'll expand that. But the whole paper is not going to be due until the very last couple of weeks of the semester. We're just starting. So how do we get started on this? Well, again, if we think about what we've already done, here I've got Yahira Murillo. Oh my God! My headache is gone. I don't know what happened there. Forgive me if I didn't pronounce that correctly. Send the correct pronunciation. Here's her thesis. In her work, and she's talking about Alice Walker's everyday use. She insinuates that heritage is beautiful, and it links the past to the present. It is not something that is possessed and shown off as something materialistic. And then she follows through on that. And really, I want to throw a few bits of praise your way because you did such a good job of exploring the significance in your commentary. In just about every paragraph. You do that, and you go into your analysis of the point that you had made in the paragraph. And every paragraph has a point. See, and that point relates to your topic sentence. Just got to think about settling on that main point. I'm going to bring up another one. This is Julio's on instinct, right? Here's his thesis. Upon hearing the advice, talking about the advice, the old man from Sulphur Creek, the man's mind doesn't change. But here's his whole point. His paper is called Instinct. And he says, this is a great statement, the dog is pure instinct itself, and the difference in their outcomes is drastic. In other words, the dog has a form of intelligence. Instinct is a form of intelligence that warns the dog about the cold, about the danger, about what can happen, about the imminent death. The man, in many ways, is inferior to the dog because the man lacks that power of instinct. And he made this point. He made it so well. He stayed with this point throughout his essay. So I'm going to explain to you, what we're doing. That's just a little bit different, but it's not that different. Had a number of really, really good papers. And again, you're going to be getting these back. Faith Leslie's paper, and I could highlight a lot of these. She says Balthasar is not only preaching to the good trees, but he's demonstrating through the narrative's point of view a hypocritical mockery. And she makes this case, she makes this point, she echoes that word hypocrisy, she stays with that, she analyzes it, she does what? She hammers that point home. Just like an attorney that won't let go, will not stop making the case, and you make that case. I don't have the paper right here, but one of you, and I'm trying to remember your name, you did so well on using counter arguments. I'm going to bring that paper up and show you that paper online. It was again about London's to build a fire. Okay, so I want to get back to this. Got this Zeus's headache. Zeus, the king of the gods, had a great headache because it was prophesied that one of his children would overthrow him. And so he mated, he chased after, lusted after Metis, right? And so the prophecy was that one of those kids would overthrow him. So what does he do? He eats her. He just swallows her, But then he has this great headache. And what happens? Out of this headache, he gives birth. He gives birth to Athena, who is a goddess of wisdom. So that's where we come from. How do we somehow give birth to our ideas and our wisdom? Well, first of all, you're just remembering. If we believe Socrates, and I think he was absolutely right, I think Jung was absolutely right, you're just remembering something you already knew. The insight was already inside of you. So this is the pleasure of art. This is the pleasure of short stories. You read the short story, you see the movie, you see the work of art, you see the sculpture, you see the painting, and it triggers in you an awareness, an aha, that moment where you are aware of a truth that maybe you knew before, but now it has come back to the surface, maybe for the third or fourth or fifth time, who knows, but it's come back to the surface. It is renewed. You are now aware, you are now conscious of it. It's been brought to that level by your engagement with that work of art, right? So you read a story, I'm just going to take this off the top of my head. You read a story like Joyce Carol's Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been? And you realize the incredible danger of flirting with evil, of going just that extra step too far towards the dark side, and what ultimately can happen. Very, very powerful story. Anyway, there are so many. So it's how do we get these ideas? I'm going to make a suggestion to you. Maybe you've never heard of this. What is it? I mean, just manufacture thesis. They probably don't just They probably don't just pop out of your head. So I like to think of a thesis as a transplanted conclusion. You've thought, and you've thought, you've had brain sweat about the story. Maybe it just came to you, but you need to refine it. And it came to you in the form of something you concluded. Take that, refine it, rework it, word it powerfully, and then transplant it to the top of your paper. That becomes your thesis, and now you defend it. Now you look at the arguments and the counter arguments. Now you use the evidence. Now you back it. And that's how that process takes place, right? So this is closely related to theme, and I needed to say a few words about some of these elements of short stories because they are priceless. They are classic, and they give you a way in if you want to weigh in. Theme, symbolism, irony, those are the big three, and not the only ones. You've got tone, you've got point of view, you've got many, many, many elements of short stories. You've got plot, which is in its own way sometimes incredibly powerful. But out of the plot arises some form of awareness that you've had. I don't think writers necessarily plant themes and stories and say, oh, like a moral to a story. But think about this for a minute. Remember on the test, some of you still had problems with this, but if you really want to have a close personal connection to a story, oftentimes you deal with theme. And you put that in the form of an entire statement, not a motif, right? Not a motif. So a motif might be refusal to let go of the past. That's incomplete. A statement of theme might take that motif, that disconnected idea, and put it in the form of an entire statement that we're going to commit to supporting. Emily Grierson, the protagonist of William Faulkner's A Rose for Emily, demonstrates that refusal to let go of the past can result ultimately in tragedy. That's not really as well worded as I'd like. I'd have to rework that, but you get the idea. That truth is one that survives. It is a long-standing truth, and it stays with us. So there's something so powerful in theme. Irony. It's a form of pleasure. It's a form of pleasure. My wife and I, after we go see a movie that we really enjoyed and we really thought about, then we talk about it afterwards, or a play, right? Or a book that we read together. We talk about it afterwards. This is a form of pleasure. We talk about irony. We talk about what the suggestions of whatever that work of art might have been. And this brings us, those insights will bring us all kinds of heightened pleasure, heightened awareness, heightened consciousness. You know, it is a form of feeling good. It's like that jogger's high that you can get. It's pretty amazing. So, in any case, I wanted to hit on it. I wanted to hit on irony because irony actually does bring us pleasure. You take a story like young Goodman Brown. Here's young Goodman Brown with his faithful wife, Faith. He has such trust in her. And then he goes deeper and darker into the forest, a symbol for the Puritans of where you may find evil, where you may find, satanic ritual, where you may find witches practicing their black arts. And so he goes deeper and deeper. And again, I mean, we have this idea that crops up that if you're going to look hard enough for what's bad and what's wrong in someone, you may find it. Was it a dream? Was it reality? We don't know. But the irony is, of course, in this, that the more deeply he pursues this suspiciousness that lurks within inside him, it has a form of inner corruption for him. He becomes cynical. He becomes bitter. Full of irony. So, in any case, I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I wanted to talk about the headache because, you can free write and find out all these ideas. Many of them will come to you. You don't have to deal with literary elements if that's not what you want to do. You can pick a point and you can make that point, and you're free to make that point. You're running it by me because, you want to have something you can generate 800 to 1,000 words about. Ultimately. Okay. So the first thing, you just read the story. You highlight it. You really then maybe do a close reading, a textual reading where you read certain passages very closely. This is just paying your dues. It doesn't mean you're dumb. I remember I was a philosophy minor and taught philosophy for a while. I remember reading the same essay 6, 7, 8, 9 times, more than that. It's because it took me that long to extract whatever kind of insights I wanted to extract from it. It didn't come instantly. So maybe it doesn't for you. But you know what? I got to say, as a group, you guys are doing a great job. I'm not blowing smoke here. Yeah, we need some adjustments. In some cases, some major ones. But as a group, you're tops. Okay, so I want to talk to you just a little bit about ultimately where we're headed with this paper. So I wrote this kind of sideways, expanded conversation circle. So now you've had a conversation, in essence, between you and the story in your analytical essay and in your comparison contrast essay. Now we're going to expand that circle, but I'm going to show you how, one step at a time. So don't get ahead of yourself. Some of you get very anxious. You become nervous and you want all the answers right now and you want it to happen instantaneously. It's all right. Take a deep breath, like I say. One step at a time. This step is to generate as many ideas about the story as you possibly can. And some of them are maybe far-fetched. Maybe they seem odd to you. So, if you want to use the elements, use them. If you don't. Generate another form of argument if you would prefer. You know, one of the most novel ideas I received was C.J. Whelan's idea that somehow the Negro servant was complicit in the crime, the murder of Homer Barron. Okay, he didn't push it too hard, but it was a novel idea. So don't be afraid of your fresh ideas. It's just a matter of supporting them based on the evidence within the story and looking at the evidence that doesn't support your point of view, if it be there, and it often is. So how do we expand the circle? Well, imagine it as a conversation. You're talking, in essence, with the story, and you're generating an idea about it. Now we're going to bring another party into the loop. That other party will be literary criticism. A third, fourth source, maybe more. It can be literary critic, or it can be, let's say, for example, you want to delve more deeply into some Freudian or Jungian or Maslowian bit of psychology that relates to the story. Or Nietzsche, the philosopher, somehow relates to the story. You're using another source. You're adding to the conversation. This is what we'll do with this paper. First, you've got to find out what you're curious about and what you want to drive home, what points you want to drive home. Or points. Give me a bunch of them. Give me as many as you can, right? That's all, really, for this week. We're not going to deal with the logic and critical thinking in any meaningful way until the next couple of weeks. So we're going to table that just a little bit. You still have the exercises on fallacies. You're looking up the meanings of the fallacies that I gave you and trying to pinpoint those fallacies. You'll have other examples. We'll go into induction, deduction, logical fallacies, again, premises, enthymemes, everything you've always wanted to know about critical thinking. So, syllogisms, and so on. That's coming up. Okay, so hope that helps a little bit, because really it's just a grocery list of ideas you have about the story that we're looking for. But it's very important, even though it's only worth 5 points. If you don't get on board at this point, it's hard for me to help you. It really is hard for me to help you. I mean, if you ask for help later on, it's, oh man, I'm really floundering. I don't know what to do with this. It's going to be really tough for me, because I'm going to say, well, what was your point? What points or point did you want to make? And you didn't do the first part. So important, even though it's only worth 5 points. Well, I'm having a little bit of a headache, so I'm going to be seeing you a little bit later, because I feel like I'm going to give birth to a whole bunch of ideas here very, very soon.